I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Lance Velchuk here, for Air on the Head's The F***ing Black Sheep, where we take a look at the opposing opinion of the genre's most divisive films. Stephen King's It has been released to glowing reviews. We can all rejoice and be thankful that one of King's most well-known stories has finally gotten a proper R-rated adaptation. King is a hard author to translate into film. He has a true skill of fleshing out characters in a way that can ground even the most ridiculous ideas. King adaptations run the gamut of perfection to heartbreaking, and most of the films fall flat. The best ones are made by a select few, with Stanley Kubrick gone and Rob Reiner doing whatever he's doing. We need Frank Darabont to adapt all Stephen King films. You're on the wrong side of history, MC.
The wrong side.
The problem is one must wade through a river of shit to find gold. There is a middle ground, some very solid films based off King's work. One of these is an old favorite of mine, a monster film with a great antagonist, an interesting story, and an unsettling number of real rats. I am talking about
The Graveyard Shift.
Based on King's short story by the same name. It's a brisk 18 pages, and because of that, the film does a pretty good job of staying faithful to the original material. Our lead, Hall, is a drifter who's wandering the land after the passing of his wife. He gets a job at the local Bachman Mill, a nod to King, and offered a position on the cleanup crew over the 4th of July weekend. The foreman, Warwick, needs to clean up the basement and get rid of the rat infestation before the local government shuts the mill back down. That's what gets our band of hardworking men and women into the path of the monster. It's a simple premise, and one they don't try and overcomplicate. Graveyard Shift is a monster movie. And full disclosure, I absolutely love monster movies. They make everything better. Take a look at Toolbox Murders, a great slasher, where the killer is actually a monster. You'll be missed, Mr. Hooper. You'll be missed. In terms of actual filmmaking, this movie is surprisingly competent. The original short story was brisk, basic, and to the point. That needs to be said, because what really holds this film together is that snappy rhythmic pace. By the 20-minute mark, it sets up both Hall, the boss man Warwick, the monster, and the rat infestation. At the 40-minute mark, we get the holiday weekend cleanup job, and at 1 hour, we are chasing the creature. They don't waste any time here, because the original aim was to be a fun and terrifying monster movie. Nothing more. The killer bat lives and moves around underground tunnels that exist below the entire town and can be accessed beneath the old mill. Everything looks worn and lived in. You can almost smell the must. They used a real mill. Everything in it looks muggy, and every actor is constantly sweating. They have convincing sound stages for the basement and tunnel system as well. The main feeding ground for the killer bat makes great use of an old school matte painting technique. The look works. Graveyard Shift conveys King's story setting on a small budget. What's a good setting if you can't fill it with interesting characters? Now, I must admit that most of the characters here are one note, but I will commend that everyone looks the part. Hall, Brogan, and Danson all look like working men. The foreman Warwick and Brad Dourif's Exterminator are two prize-winning characters in this film. Coming off the success of Child's Play, we get more of an extended cameo from Dourif, and he wastes no time with a smaller role. Early on in the film, he gives a monologue about his hatred for rats and his time in Vietnam. That's so good, it might have been written for another film.
They cover it with a flaming rice ball, and let me tell you, that gray, black son of a bitch would have nowhere else to go but inside.
Seriously, if I just add some dramatic music?
They cover it with a flaming rice ball, and let me tell you, that gray, black son of a bitch would have nowhere else to go.
You might just have to give the man an Oscar. Let's be clear, this is Stephen Mock's film. He gives not only the best performance, but really gives us one of the most underrated villains. Holy shit, does this man steal the show. First off, he does what may be the most interesting accent I have ever heard.
Now we can get you that audition on Star Search. Job split evenly, night by night. Tried to keep it interesting.
You ever run the pickup? When's the last time you've been to a graveyard?
It's not just good.
It's amazing.
I watched this movie a few times trying to find a point where he drops it or doesn't follow through, but this man is a master of his craft, and his weird idiolect helps carve out his own version of Warwick. He's a tough, crew-cut short-sleeve wearing hard-ass, and there are hints of something more. In the third act, with the monster bat in full force, the group splits up and Warwick goes full metal jacket. With the use of dirt as war paint, his method for crawling, and even the way he fights, it's obvious that he's more than just a foreman at a mill. Warwick has been in battle. With the Vietnam monologue from Dorff, it's clear that the war has a bit more to do with the story than a one-off speech. It explains a lot. His haircut and drill sergeant-like attitude. Think about it, he comes back from war and opens up an abandoned mill in a small Maine town that would be its driving economy. That right there would explain why he seems to give a shit less about the people who keep disappearing. Not only his livelihood, but the town is at stake, with the mill bordering on closing. You can see it's a really poor small town with only one bar. Now, none of this is said, but the puzzle pieces are there. As fun as this film is, it has its problems. The directing is passable, but could have been more stylistic and helped push more fear for the monster. There are many times where the threat doesn't seem that bothersome to most. The Djinn himself doesn't do much, but has one smart moment at the end. He freaks out, which you don't usually see in these types of films. He just couldn't handle the fact that a giant bat was murdering his fellow coworkers, and has an honest, real reaction.
I'm not going! No, I'm not going anymore! No more!
There's also some very awkward and poorly mixed ADR that pops up throughout the film. It's not terribly distracting, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it.
Basement cleanup. Clean up this, Warwick.
Graveyard Shift isn't a perfect film, but for the life of me, I don't understand its 13% Rotten Tomatoes score. The Dark Tower, Golden Years, and Dreamcatcher all have higher Rotten Tomatoes scores. Dreamcatcher, a movie with alien ass worms played dramatic and straight, that has a higher score than Graveyard Shift? Come on, Jesus Christ. Not only is its score fatally low at 13%, but it's always at the bottom of every Stephen King film list. I'm taking a lonely road here, but it must be said, Graveyard Shift is a good movie. It's not supposed to be the shining level of terror or a misery type of commentary, but can't a man make a fun monster movie? There are far worse King films, and this has been unfairly grouped in for too long. No more. Graveyard Shift has an amazing antagonist, a cool monster, and some great looking set pieces. It deserves a retrial. It deserves a second chance. And I'll leave you with that, like the good foreman once said.
Show's over.